We've talked a lot about the plain English summary, and I'm sure you've got the message. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about it and how it relates to the scientific summary as well. So if we think back to our four key propositions from Aldridge and Derrington, basically the plain English summaries and the summaries generally are there for the first two propositions. So they're really nailing home the importance and the fact that the project can answer the question. It's basically both of them, scientific and lay summary, the mini-me of your big grant proposal. So people can really get to grips with what's going on in a very brief bit of writing. It's all about getting your foot in the door. It's about attention, getting people's attention and orientating them, getting them ready to read the rest of your grant application. It establishes the importance of what it is that you're trying to do, and it provides a project preview. And Aldridge and Derrington say if you fail to gain readers' interest here, you're unlikely to succeed elsewhere in your document. And indeed, you've probably got the vibe that sometimes people don't read your whole grant application in great detail. And I have heard people, indeed those who sit on panels, say if I can't see the importance in the plain English summary, I sometimes don't bother to read much more. So it is actually a very important thing. So that's Phil's foot, courtesy of Phil. So what we're looking for in both the scientific and plain English summaries really is our clear, simple statements. There are no detailed arguments or justifications. It's basically what is the project about? Why is it important? And why is it important to do it now? So that is the problem. It breaks the project down. So how you will answer the research questions, basically the plan, and how will patients and the public benefit? So the potential impact. So those are the things that you're trying to get across in your summaries. Now, obviously, different funding bodies will have different formats, and sometimes you are asked for specific sections, and make sure you always do what you're told. The importance of projects should be immediately obvious. We don't want to expect reviewers to search for a needle in a haystack. We want it to be exceedingly obvious. Just a few words about scientific versus plain English summaries. You'll note that NIHR nowadays tends to ask for just a plain English summary at stage 1. So it really is your elevator pitch and getting your foot in the door. And it's not until stage 2 that they ask for a scientific summary. So it does vary according to funder, but that's sometimes the case. So in terms of the audience for your scientific summary, it's pitched at those specialist peer reviewers and detailed readers, people who are really going to look in detail, but need to understand the sort of scientific context of it. And it's also helpful to non-specialty panel members, perhaps those with a methodological or scientific background, but won't necessarily understand all of it. Compared to the plain English summary, where it's I say it's primarily for lay panel members. That's not strictly true. It's there also for non-specialty panel members, for those with a general scientific knowledge, but who really don't know anything about the area. And I've put specialist peer reviewers in brackets because of course they do use it as well. It orientates them. In terms of what you can say, well, you can use scientific terms in the scientific abstract, but do explain them, especially if there's no lay summary. And in the plain English summary or the lay summary, there shouldn't be any scientific terms. The language in the scientific abstract could be more formal, but in the plain English summary, we expect it to be informal, even colloquial. And Bernard was talking about the use of metaphors and colloquialisms in trying to get ideas across, because the heart of the plain English summary is to really tell people what it is that you're trying to do. So you employ all means to do that. The importance of the plain English summary, well, I think that's come across, but different from a practical point of view, it is a requirement for NIHR and other funders, so they expect you to have one. It sets the scene and tone, and it can affect how the whole application will be judged. Usually it's a first, and unfortunately sometimes the only part of your application. People read at committee. I think most committee members are more dedicated and they will read more, but sometimes people have a great deal of work to do and they're in a terrible hurry, and it may be something that they only look at the plain English summary, which is then discussed a bit more at the committee meeting. it primes the reader for the content of the main application, which I think is important. And just a quote from the NIHR website, if the plain English summary is well written, somehow the whole application seems easier to assess. I have an idea of what it is about, and that is the NIHR Public Reviewer. And these are very important people on the panel. If you've ever observed a panel, if you ever get an opportunity to observe a panel, do it, because you can see how the dynamics work. And it can only take one panel member. Sometimes a lay panel member will say, well, you know, they haven't done this, or they haven't done that, or they haven't taken this into account, or I can't understand this. And it sort of sets off a kind of domino effect. And people say, well, actually, you're right, they can't see this either, and they haven't done this right. And by the way, and suddenly something that was standing up quite well is suddenly being pulled to pieces. So making it as easy as possible for people to understand what it is that you're trying to do, getting them on side right from the start is tremendously helpful. The purpose of the plain English summary, well, for reviewers and committee members to basically have a better understanding of the application. It should excite all readers, so whether they're detailed readers, you know, speed readers, lay readers, it's enticing them to look further at the application. It basically engages lay and speed readers and comforts detailed readers. So detailed readers can see, so this is coming, and lay and speed readers can say, all right, I get the gist of it now. And later on, it'll be used for research funders to publicise the research. And you'll notice that the NIHR publishes all the plain English summaries on their website once they've funded research. And for public health professionals, policymakers, and the media is to help them understand the research. So it really is your elevator pitch. It's to immediately interest people in what it is that you're doing, whether it's a funder or whether it's someone reading the results of your work. The NIHR asks for a clear, brief overview of research. They want it written clearly and simply with no jargon, and they want it to stand alone. So this is what they want in their plain English summaries. Generally, think about your audience. These people are interested, but they're not specialists. Do not cut and paste your scientific abstract and try and edit it. You know, it's not the best way to go about it. Start again and think how you would explain it to a friend. Note that if it is felt that your plain English summary is not clear and of a good quality, then you may be required to amend it prior to final funding approval. So, you know, if it's not any good, they'll tell you to rewrite it, but that's not the main damage that can be done. The main damage that can be done is that if they don't get your plain English summary, they'll be less interested in the rest of your application. And this is the guidance that NIHR reviewers have. They are asked, does the plain English summary give a clear explanation of the research? Does it help you to carry out the review? If not, why not? Is the language appropriate and clear? If not, why not? Are the scientific terms, abbreviations, and jargon explained? If not, which terms? Could the summary be used on its own to describe the research? So basically, there's a lot there that they want to get across, and they're asking reviewers to comment, and if necessary, they will request you to make changes. The NIHR format basically has some subheadings that they're asking for. They're asking for the aims of the research, a bit about the background, the design and methods used, something on patient and public involvement, and dissemination. I always think it's odd that they ask for dissemination as a heading, because it's not an easy word and not everybody knows what it means. But basically do use these headings or something similar. Some people use sharing the results for dissemination, which I think is quite a nice way. But do use them. It's like all of these things. If they've asked you to do something, then do it, because it's easy for them to get irritated if you haven't done what they've asked you to do. In terms of the aims of the research, you're broadly saying what you're aiming to find out. And they'll want to know how patients, carers, public services will benefit from this research. In terms of the background, you know, what is the problem and how big is the problem? So it's a bit like the story that I was talking about earlier today, but it's written in easy language, very easy language. What does the problem cost in terms of patient suffering, NHS costs, or other services? Why does this research need to be done now? They want some information on the design and methods used, but obviously not going to go into complex scientific detail. Basically, broadly speaking, what is the design and the methods that have been chosen, why? And again, we wouldn't talk about a randomized control trial, or if we did, we'd say exactly what we meant by it. Who are the proposed participants? And then there's a section on patient and public involvement, and they'll want to know how have patients or the public been involved in developing the research? So their input into your development of the grant application, and also how they'll be involved in the conduct or management of the research going forward if you were to get funding. And finally, dissemination, how will the findings be communicated and to whom? Just to reiterate Bernard's plea for plain English and to demonstrate another readability tool that is around there, which is basically the Flesch-Kincaid Readability Index. We've got this little piece of text here: the arboreal swift-footed Canis rufus with a sudden and energetic leap traversed the apathetic terrestrial Canis familiaris. That's courtesy of Google AI, I have to say. If we look at the Flesch-Kincaid grade level score, it's 18.2. Now, I don't know what that means at the moment, but I will show you a better version of it in a minute. And the reading ease score of 0, basically a reading level of a college graduate, which is very difficult to read. If we look at what it actually means, which is the fox jumped over the lazy, the fox jumped over the lazy dog. We have a Flesch-Kincaid grade level 2.5. Reading ease score of almost 90, and it's appropriate to the 6th grade, so it's easy to read. Now, in a plain English summary, you are looking for a level of about a 12-year-old, and you're not looking for anything more complicated than that. So first impressions count. Remember to engage, not enrage your reader when you're writing, generally and importantly with your plain English summary. There are lots of resources, and these will be in your handouts booklet, and Bernard has already given you some of the plain English summary, the plain English campaign, but there are other sources as well. The plain English campaign handily have a sort of A to Z of alternative words that you can use, which can be very helpful. But there are various other people who have published or given advice on writing plain English.